Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. Guess who's back from a week's holiday? Yes, me, Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10 Twitter handle, and I'm joined today by Alison McConnell. How are you, Alison?
Very well, thank you, Tony. Nice to see you back.
Did you have a good weekend?
I did indeed, thank you.
Lovely job. Now, as we always do, first and foremost, we big up our sponsor, and as you can see, we're sponsored by OneFootball. It's the OneFootball app. Download it, guys. It's your one-stop football shop for scores, news, lineups, transfer rumours, live streaming, match highlights. As you can see, the link's in the description. It's a cracking app, and you can get access to all sorts of things. You can immerse yourself in the digital football world and have the best personal experience out there. And we thank OneFootball for their sponsorship of the pod. And running along the bottom, as always, we always have an offer for you. £3 for the next 3 months. You know what I'm going to say. Join us, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Now, Alison, the real football's nearly here. Sunday, Celtic will take on Aberdeen, unfurl the flag as league champions. But before that, at the weekend there, they rounded off their pre-season with a 2-0 win over Norwich. Now, there were some wonderful performances there. I just wanted to ask you, what did you think of the performance?
Yeah, I thought it was a fairly strong finish to the pre-season campaign. I think a lot of what you saw was what you would have anticipated in terms of the starting lineup and then players getting some game time. I thought it was a relatively assured performance, probably quite a positive way to round off the preparations ahead of the season. I think we've spoke about it often. It's been quite a unique summer for Celtic without the pressure of the Champions League qualifiers that tend to come around this time of year. So I think without that tension, it's a very different preparation for the league campaign. I think they look as though they're up and running. A few players, I think, playing with a real level of confidence that you saw against Norwich and in a couple of other pre-season games.
Yeah,
I think defensively there's maybe just still a few wee issues that need ironed out. I think there's still a fragility at times there, but I think overall a good performance to see out the pre-season campaigns and now look ahead until the Sunday's game against Aberdeen.
Now, two players in particular that have hit the ground running, Alison, during pre-season and showed up very well. Rio Haggerty and Dyson Maida. Now, Haggerty was at it again Saturday, a tremendous performance. He got the sponsors man of the match despite not finishing the game, but he just looked like a man possessed in pre-season, hasn't he? And the breaks really did him good.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think the fact that he's had a rest, I think it was quite clear he needed it. I think obviously a lot of game time and all. I think it can be particularly difficult for players to come to a new club mid-season. I think also when you factor in the significantly different cultural changes that he was coming into, I think it can be quite tough mentally as much as anything else. I think maybe just having a wee bit of time away from football, an opportunity just to breathe a bit, an opportunity just to settle into a new city and just take a step back and assess what had happened over the previous few months and take a break that's maybe mental as well as physical has probably been hugely beneficial for him. But I would agree with you. I think he looks hungry. I think he looks sharp. I think he looks, from what you've seen over the last month or so, he looks like a player who is going to be pivotal to the way that Celtic play this season. I think a real energy about his performances, a creativity about his performances, an enthusiasm and energy, and I think that augurs well for Ange Postecoglou ahead of the new campaign.
Yes, indeed. And also, Dyson Maida, now Sean made a great point in his man-by-man. He said that Dyson Maida typifies the Ange Postecoglou philosophy of don't ever think that you're not involved. You're always involved. He is everywhere. Dyson Maida, he's just a pest. But his goals, his last couple of goals have showed that striker's instinct, Alison, which maybe was lacking last season. But he showed a real poacher's instinct for both goals that he scored against Legia Warsaw and the one on Saturday with a clever flick.
Yeah, the wee back heel was clever. I would agree with you in terms of his work rate. I think he works tremendously hard. I think one of the games last season, I think one of the games against Rangers in 93rd minute or 94th minute or something, he's tracking back from inside the opposition penalty box, tracking all the way back to his own corner flag to chase someone down. I think he plays, there's a real industry about his performance. I think he's always on the move, he's always looking and he's always working. I think there's been some suspicion at times or some criticism at times that maybe he's not as technically gifted as some of the other players. I'm not sure that that's true. I think it's probably quite unfair. I thought he took his goal particularly well on Saturday, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look across the forward front three and you think, who starts? What is the strongest starting 11 now? Because on the back of a fairly strong pre-season, I think Maeda would be in with a shout of starting games, but you get so much too from Abada. You're getting a lot from Giakoumakis, from Kyogo, from Jota, from James Forrest. I think James Forrest is a decent pre-season too. So I think you look across that forward, front three and the middle three too, and you think, middle three I think is probably less competitive. I think you probably know who's going to start there every week, but that front three, there are very real options to change it around and real scope within games to change it, but you also think it carries real menace.
Yeah, I mean, you just spoke about that there. The one great thing for Ange Postecoglou now is that every one of them carries a potent threat, Alison. There's goals in every one of those players that you mentioned there.
Yeah, and I think there's not just goals. I think that there's goals in them, but there is also a level of work rate and maybe crucially an element of creativity that I think sometimes when you come up against really stodgy games, as Celtic will, you know, you're going through to Livingston or you're against St Mirren or you're through at Fir Park and you find it difficult, you're maybe having to play against 10 men behind the ball, you're having to find pockets of space and utilise it when you do find it. These are the players that I think can make the difference in games like that. Players with a bit of awareness and industry and crucially just a bit of creativity.
Or Ross County in a League Cup tie, Alison.
Indeed.
Away.
I was impressed. I actually saw Ross County. I saw Ross County this week, last midweek at Alloa, and I thought they played pretty well. Actually, I thought they looked all right. I mean, I think Alloa could have possibly they scored a goal in the 95th minute. I think at one point Alloa might have got a goal back, but I thought overall, they looked. They looked comfortable. They looked like, given the fact that they've lost some big players, I thought they still carried a bit of a threat. I think that'll be a very hard game for Celtic. Yeah. All the more so the fact that it's at Dingwall.
Speaking of being impressed, Alison, the Norwich manager Dean Smith was very impressed with Celtic, and he lavished praise on them. Said that their movement was terrific and some of the stuff that they played was fantastic, and he labelled them a Premier League team in the making. That's quite a compliment from somebody who's managed at that highest level, isn't it?
I thought he was very complimentary. I think, obviously, too, you think both teams are at very different places in terms of their pre-season preparations. I think you would expect Celtic to be sharper and a bit fitter, just given the fact that they've been back earlier. But I thought he was very complimentary. I'm sure that would have been lapped up quite eagerly. By people, but that's not where Celtic need their compliments to come from. What they need to be doing is replicating that on a competitive stage, and that invites its own pats on the back. I think when you're putting out a successful team, and key I think this season is what's the progression that Celtic are capable of making in a European context. What are they able to go in and compete in the Champions League, which, as we all know, is an incredibly prestigious environment. You're at elite level. What have Celtic got when they go in at that level? How big is the gap? We know there's a gap, but I think you would want to see them go in and compete and see how they can test themselves against some top teams.
Yeah. Anyone else impress you, Alison, over the course of pre-season or on Saturday? They'll just put themselves into contention for a starting slot against Aberdeen.
I don't know if anyone's put themselves in contention. I think it almost picks itself.
Yeah.
The front three, though, I think that there is real scope for consideration. But I think Jota has looked hungry. I think Jota has looked, he's come back. He's obviously been aware of all the clamour that surrounded him over the summer, of the popularity that I think he has among the Celtic support. And I think you see a very confident player in front of you at the minute. I think, again, go back to European football, I think that's where he can really show his worth to Celtic and himself, to show that he's capable of playing at that level and competing at that level. But I think he's looked very confident. I think there's a number of players you could pick out. Hatate, I think, for me, he's had an exceptionally good, strong pre-season campaign. I think big things will be expected of him now going into the new season. I think Kyogo's always looked upon as a real... is a player who brings that verve to Celtic's forward line, capable of doing something a wee bit different, just has a bit of class about him. But as we've spoken about, I think when you look at the way Maeda has played, when you look at the fact Lila Bada will have goals in him, he'll have assists in him, I think there is a real conundrum across that forward three, and that's before you get to the age-old dilemma, what it feels like now that we've spoken about over these past few months about can you shoehorn Furuhashi and Giacomakis in to play together, because they could have a very traditional front two pairing that I think would reap goals, but there's no real evidence of Ange Postecoglou deploying a front two at any point.
Now, Alison, two players were linked with moves over the weekend. One is Mikey Johnston, who's they're talking about a loan move to Standard Liège to link up again with Ronny Deila. And also there's murmurings of Toulouse making an inquiry for Stephen Welsh. Do you see any of those moves happening, or both of them happening, or neither? Do you think that it's what both players need right now? Or would you be inclined to hang on to Stephen Welsh?
The first thing I'll say is I've not done any work on the story, so I can't give any kind of opinion. I can offer an opinion, but it's little more than that. I think it makes sense for Mikey Johnston to go. I think he's had a fairly decent pre-season too. I think the competition that's in front of him makes it very difficult to get into the first team or play much first team football this season. I think it would make sense, given the age he's at, the stage he's at in his career, to go somewhere and play football. And I think going to a new culture too, I think can be challenging. I think it can help you mature a wee bit as a person and as a player. I think it would be a good move for him if it came to fruition. Stephen Welsh, I think, is a bit different, just given where Celtic are at the minute. And I know, obviously, like they've brought in the Maurice Jens, but I think in terms of the depth, I'm not sure that the manager would be keen to let him go. You've obviously seen that he's played a fair bit of pre-season with Carl Starfelt being injured. I'm not sure that unless there's a feeling that there is adequate cover and he's not going to play much, that it would make sense for Stephen Welsh to go out. Mikey Johnston, I think, is a slightly different situation.
Sure. Now, Ange Postecoglou said he hopes that Carl Starfelt will join the boys in training at some point this week. Now, Maurice Jens came in and made his debut on Saturday, looked very comfortable on the ball. A lot of people saying, a lot of supporters saying that he should start with Jens and Cameron Carter-Vickers at the back against Aberdeen. Do you think that'd be too early for someone like Maurice Jens to just be parachuted straight into the side, or do you think that he showed enough against Norwich to maybe?
I'm not sure. I think the indication, if you're basing it so far in pre-season, is that Stephen Welsh will probably start. And I think the fact that Stephen Welsh started on Saturday again would lend yourself to come to that conclusion. However, I think you know that there is always scope for a surprise in that regard. I think we're not privy to what goes on a day-to-day basis in a way that Ange Postecoglou will be. He'll be able to make assessments on the training field. I'm not sure where Jens is in terms of his fitness, in terms of just being up to speed and ready to play 90 minutes. I think I would probably anticipate that it's Stephen Welsh that starts as the season gets deeper and people get fitter, and there's obviously Starfelt to come back in. I think it becomes quite interesting too, just where he fits in. And the one thing I would say is that he's not played a lot of first team football anywhere really. It's not like he's coming in the back of a a strong season elsewhere last term. So my own opinion would be I think it would be Stephen Welsh who starts.
Julien's still there as well, Alison. Still stuff bubbling away under the surface with Julien, but I'm inclined to agree with you. I wouldn't let Stephen Welsh go until Starfelt's back fully fit, and Maurice Gents is also champing at the bit to play if that comes to fruition at all with Stephen Welsh going elsewhere.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think you have to make an assessment of the squad. I think you can see how quickly it can be exposed at times if you have injuries to players in the same position coming in back-to-back games. I think you saw it a couple of times, particularly at the opening weeks of the season last year. So I think, if there is to be any kind of move away for Stephen Welsh, I think it will only come when you know exactly where Starfelt is and whether Gents is up to speed or not. The Christopher Julian situation, I think, remains intriguing too. I think he's clearly not part of the first team plans for Ange Postecoglou, and move away fell down at the last minute already. But I think you would anticipate that Christopher Julian will want to be getting first team football somewhere. I think it makes sense. I think obviously a very experienced player for Celtic, and financially I don't think it makes sense to hang on to him if he's not going to be a regular feature.
Now, Alison, I say an important anniversary, but there's an anniversary today around Celtic. It's 25 years to the day since Henrik Larsson signed for the club. Well, not happened to Henrik, but wonderful servant, 242 goals, 315 games, numerous trophies, probably one of the most outstanding pieces of business that the club ever did in the transfer market. But what a footballer.
Yeah, I think, in the modern game, he would be one of the iconic figures of Celtic's history post-millennia. I think, really associated with that time under the Martin O'Neill era when Celtic kicked on. And I know he arrived before that, but associated with a really successful period too in the club's history, and part of a very well thought of side. I think, again, another player who came in without much fanfare and going through the court process, and Celtic getting him for an absolute steal. So. But I think probably there would be very few who would argue that he's not one of the best signings that the club ever made, the most successful piece of business when you think what Celtic paid for Henrik Larsson and what they got in return. But one thing that's probably forgotten sometimes when this is discussed is that Celtic were probably as good for Henrik Larsson as Henrik Larsson was to Celtic too. I think it offered him a platform and a home. It gave him scope to go and express himself as a player and make himself noticed. I think there were ample opportunities for him to move before he did so. I think there was interest elsewhere. I think what he done in a European context for Celtic was never going to slip under the radar when you're performing at that level. And I think an extraordinary footballer who would probably a lot of Celtic fans felt vindicated when he went on and won the Champions League and played at the level that he did, because obviously there is always an aspersion cast that if you're scoring goals and winning golden boots in Scotland, that it doesn't really quite qualify the same way if you're in a more competitive league. And I remember Martin O'Neill having a really terse put down with Alan Shearer when that in a conversation for the World Cups. And he said to me, "They've scored just as many as you. Don't you worry about that." But I think, I think an extraordinary player for Celtic, and I think if Henrik Larsson turned up on Sunday afternoon at Celtic Park, you could be assured of the kind of welcome that he would get.
Now, I've put a link to an article I did about a magnificent 7 defenders who tried to put the shackles on Larsson. And it's very interesting from their point of view, because they tell you what it was like to try and mark Henrik Larsson. It's on the website. I put the link in the comment section there. Have a read, guys. It's terrific just to see the way Henrik Larsson went about his business. These guys tell you that they tried to mark him, Alison, and he would just vanish into thin air and score. And they were just like, wow, he was just a genius, basically, as a footballer. And I always caveat it with, there's one foreign footballer who was named in the all-time Celtic Great 11 in that night in the Hydro, and that was Henrik Larsson. that's quite an impact to make, isn't it?
Yeah, I think his impact is unquestionable. I think his goal returning and so much more. He was a real iconic figure for that Celtic team. He really was, and then I think there was a level of pride that Celtic fans took when he went away and then showcased what he had elsewhere. I think, I think an extraordinary footballer, and I think his return at Celtic will go down. I think it's in the history books there, and I think he'll be celebrated as one of the real Celtic greats for forevermore, I suppose. I think an extraordinary piece of business that brought him to the club, and a hugely successful signing.
Those goal stats are ingrained in my mind, Alison, because I described every one of them for the pull-out. I described 242 goals, which it's just like, wow, how do you say the same thing 242 times? But I did it. There you go. Here's a comment, Alison, from Polly Moskos. Tony looks so happy remembering anything, aren't we all, I suppose? Listen, it's he'll never be forgotten, and I just thought it was a nice way to end the show, Alison, on a real positive and a high as we count down the days to another positive and a high when Celtic unfurl the flag, and we will preview that in the coming days. But Alison, thanks for your contribution, first class as always. Guys, thanks for your comments. I try to get a couple of them up, but I'm a bit of a technophobe at times, Alison. You know how it is. I can't multitask. I try to, certainly, but we'll be back tomorrow as the countdown continues to the Aberdeen match. We thank One Football for their sponsorship of the pod. Then you know the drill. Subscribe to the Celtic Way. £3 for the next 3 months. Just hit that subscribe button, w.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Thanks, guys. All the best. Take care.
Thank you.